We like to think of our homes as fortresses, but in the digital age, a lock is just an illusion of safety. Right now, someone could be watching you through a lens you didn't know was there, or standing just outside your window, waiting for the glow of your smartphone to fade into the dark. We share our lives, our locations, and our secrets with the world, forgetting that the shadows are always listening. Tonight, we are diving into 3 true accounts that redefine the meaning of a home invasion. These aren't just stories about strangers in the dark. They are about the betrayal of the people we trust, and the terrifying reality that once someone decides to follow you, there is nowhere on earth left to hide. The first fracture in the illusion of safety began on a prestigious campus in the Northeast. For a sophomore English major, life was a predictable cycle of lectures, libraries, and the pursuit of a law degree. The environment felt secure, guarded by the weight of tradition and the comfort of academic routine. She was a serious student, the kind who participated in every seminar, and it was in one of those small, upper-level courses on romanticism that the seeds of her nightmare were planted. The class was led by a teaching assistant named Raw, a lanky, awkward man in his late 20s who had an unsettling way of maintaining eye contact just a second too long. He was an oddball, but in a university setting, oddballs are common. No one thought twice about him. Then there was Luke. Luke was the kind of guy who commanded the room without trying. He was charismatic, funny, and a prominent member of a top-tier fraternity. Unlike most students, he actually did the reading and engaged with the material. He and our narrator began to bond over shared discussions in class, and soon, that academic connection turned into a relationship. It was uncomplicated, low maintenance, and seemingly perfect. Luke was sweet and attentive, the kind of boyfriend who made the stress of college life feel manageable. But beneath the surface of their standard romance, a dark and illegal transaction was already in motion. The first sign that something was wrong appeared in the most mundane way. She spotted Luke behind the lecture hall, sharing a cigarette with Raw. They were talking with a level of familiarity that felt out of place. When she questioned him about it, Luke laughed it off, claiming he was just trying to stay on the t's good side to secure a better grade. It was a plausible lie, the kind of thing any student might do. But the feeling of unease lingered, a quiet static in the back of her mind that wouldn't go away. A few weeks later, the static turned into a scream. While Luke was asleep one night, his phone lay open on the bed. Driven by a sudden, inexplicable impulse, she decided to look through it. She expected to find another girl, or perhaps some harmless secrets. Instead, she found a digital gallery of her own life. There were hundreds of photos of her. Some were from their dates, but many others were taken from a distance. Photos of her studying in the library. Photos of her walking to class. Photos of her through her bedroom window. She was being documented like a specimen. The horror deepened when she realized Luke was sending these photos to an unsaved number every single day. When the police eventually intervened, the sickening truth came to light. The unsaved number belonged to Raw, the TA. Raw hadn't just been grading her papers. He had been paying Luke hundreds of dollars to stalk her from the inside. The man she slept next to was a freelance photographer for a predator who sat at the front of her classroom. Luke was expelled and Raw was fired, but the story didn't end with a court date. A year later, a silver sedan began appearing outside her new home. It never moves. No one ever gets out. It just sits there, a silent, idling reminder that once your life has been sold, you can never truly buy back your privacy. Being watched from a distance is terrifying, but it's nothing compared to realizing the threat is already inside your walls. In the frozen, desolate isolation of Northern California, a young man named Mikey learned this lesson in the most visceral way possible. Mikey lived in a house surrounded by miles of dense, silent forest. It was the kind of place where the nearest neighbor was a 10-minute drive away and the snow acted as a muffling blanket, burying any sound of approach. When his parents left for a weekend wedding in Portugal, Mikey looked forward to the solitude. He didn't know that the silence of the woods was about to be broken by the sound of his own racing heart. On his second night alone, Mikey woke up in the dead of night. It wasn't a loud noise that woke him, but a shift in the air, a subtle change in the room's energy. He looked toward his closet and felt his stomach drop. His sliding closet door, which he meticulously closed every night due to a childhood phobia, was standing wide open. He was alone. The house was locked. There was no reason for that door to be ajar. Driven by a surge of adrenaline, he grabbed his phone and clicked on the flashlight. The beam of light cut through the darkness and landed on the foot of his bed. Standing there, just inches from his feet, were 2 figures. They weren't moving. They weren't reaching for him. They were just standing in the dark, watching him breathe. The moment the light hit them, they didn't attack, they scattered like insects. Mikey heard their heavy footsteps pounding down the hallway and the front door slamming shut. He chased them into the living room, but the woods had already swallowed them whole. When the police arrived, they found no signs of forced entry. Every window was latched, and every door was secure. They told Mikey he must have simply forgotten to lock the front door, dismissing his terror as the product of an overactive imagination in a lonely house. But as Mikey stood in his room after they left, he looked down at the floor where the figures had stood. Lying on the hardwood was a heavy, serrated knife taken from his own kitchen. They hadn't come to rob him. They had come to stand over him with a blade, waiting for him to wake up. The lack of forced entry didn't mean he forgot to lock the door. It meant they were already inside the house before he ever turned the key. They had been in the walls, in the crawl space, or in that very closet, waiting for the lights to go out. Our final descent into this digital age nightmare takes us to Columbus, Ohio, where a young woman named Natasha sought the independence of her first solo apartment. It was supposed to be a sanctuary, a place where she could work remotely and enjoy her own schedule. But within weeks of moving in, she began to notice a recurring character in the periphery of her life. A man in a grey hoodie. He was on the stairs when she came home from the gym. He was by the dumpsters when she took out the trash. And eventually, he was in a navy blue sedan, parked in a spot that offered a direct line of sight into her second-floor window. Natasha tried to convince herself she was being paranoid. In a mid-sized apartment complex, you were bound to see the same people. But the coincidences began to defy the laws of probability. One evening, she drove 15 minutes away to a Chipotle in a part of town she rarely visited. As she sat there eating, she looked up and saw the grey hoodie. He was sitting across the restaurant, mimicking her movements, watching her with a steady, unblinking focus. This wasn't a neighbor. This was a predator who had mapped her routine down to the second. Terrified, Natasha broke her lease and moved back in with her parents, miles away. She changed her gym, changed her routes, and disappeared into the safety of her childhood home. She thought she had won, but the stalker wanted the last word. On her final morning at the apartment, she found a handwritten note slipped under her door. It wasn't a threat of violence. It was something much more haunting. It read, "You should really close your blinds at night." The message was clear. He had seen everything. He had been there in the dark, watching her sleep, watching her dress, watching her live, all while she thought her walls were solid. A month later, standing in her parents' living room, she looked out the window. 2 blocks away, idling on a quiet residential street where it had no reason to be, was the navy blue sedan. He didn't want to break in. He didn't want to steal. He wanted her to know that no matter where she went, the blinds would never be thick enough to keep him out. We live in a world where we think we are the ones doing the watching, but these stories prove that we are often the ones being watched. We trust our partners, we trust our locks, and we trust that our privacy is a right. But privacy is a fragile thing, easily shattered by a camera lens or a kitchen knife. The people in these stories did everything right. They locked their doors. They called the police. They moved away. And yet, the shadows followed them. Tonight, as you lay in bed, think about the spaces in your home you haven't checked. Think about the car that has been parked at the end of your street for just a little too long. Think about the person who knows your routine better than you do. Because the most terrifying thing about a stalker isn't the moment they reveal themselves. It's the thousands of hours they spent watching you before you ever knew they were there. There is one detail from Natasha's case that she didn't tell the police. When she first moved into that apartment, she found a small, circular mirror glued to the underside of a ceiling fan, angled perfectly toward her bed. She thought it was a fluke left by the previous tenant. She realized too late that it wasn't a mirror. It was a high-definition lens, wired directly into the building's power supply. When she moved to her parents' house, she checked her new room. And there, tucked into the corner of the smoke detector, was the same shimmering glass eye. He wasn't following her. He was already there, waiting in every room she would ever call home. If this journey into the dark has left you looking over your shoulder, you aren't alone. The world is a much smaller, much more transparent place than we care to admit. If you want to hear more accounts of the true horrors hiding in the digital age, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. We upload stories that the mainstream media refuses to touch, stories that happen to people just like you. Check your locks, close your blinds, and look closely at the people in your life. You never know who is holding the camera. Sleep well, if you can. We'll be watching.